So let's start off with the very first lines. The very first lines. My English professor's ass was so beautiful. It was perfect and full as she stood at the board writing some important word. Reality or perhaps illusion. She opened the door. With each movement of her arms and her hand, delicately but forcefully inscribing the letters intended for our eyes, her ass shook, ever so slightly. I had never learned from a woman with a body before. Something slow, horrible, and glowing was happening inside me. I stood on the foothills to heaven. She opened the door, and yeah, we're getting that right at the very first line. That kind of the tension, the marriage of mind and body, of learning and also noticing, and the teacher notices this and reads it out loud, and that leads to I don't remember her reading. I remember her reading me. I remember her reading my poem. I remember her holding something I wrote, a gleaming page, mine, that rolled out of the sad typewriter on the kitchen table at 33 Swan Place. My father had given us that typewriter. It wasn't even mine yet. It was ours, the family. It would be mine when I left home. I was already gone. I would take it with me, but everyone sat in class now, listened while Eva Nelson, the teacher, stood there and read my Inferno. The waves rolled on, and indeed, there's that sense of this Inferno that we're getting here is Eileen Miles's Inferno. You know, am I going to be someone who's creating, or am I going to be an object? Before I could write, before I even knew how to spell, I went out with my best friend Billy LeBlanc, and we created a bunch of letters out of symbols we knew. Sun, wave, stick. We made letters. We had so much to say to everybody, and we pronounced our ideas carefully with crayons and paper, and we folded them up and placed them in one mailbox on a house on our street. We were so excited because the silence of our childhood was over. We wrote. We sat on the sidewalk outside of that house. We anticipated a response. We waited and waited. Then we simply forgot. But that sun, the first tiny symbol, still sits there, blazing in my head, which is like, that's a writer right there. Sun blazing in my head. That's the symbol of the sun. So this is the purgatory section of a poet's life. She's actually is a poet, and now we're going. And indeed, it starts off with the thing of the abstract. The second section of my novel, Inferno, coincides with Dante's Purgatorio, and in it I concern myself with the career of the poet. She was 19 years old when they burned her body in the middle of town while she was still alive. A white dove came out of her mouth as she died. 567 years ago today, a dove leaped right out of her mouth. This is Rosie. She was wild, running at me in the glee of total immersion in this wet, bright new substance. I took her to Cherry Grove with Jeanette, where she encountered a wave. I see that moment like an eternally still woodblock wave that is curling ominously over a small black and white dog, and Rose, entirely frightened and in awe. I'm in love. Here's a bit, just like kind of a little thing of just sort of sadness. Once in a while, very rarely, when I felt this bad, I hold on. I stay in that little blue hallway outside despair for a moment. It's other people thinking, not mine. See what comes, they chirp. Just a strange event in someone's life, something that's sort of like inexplicable. Out in the country again. One morning when I started out, I saw up in the sky something that resembled an old set-in fan that had removed cooking odors and smoke from the kitchen I grew up in. Now that fan was turning in the sky. I felt dizzy watching the tiny spirals of blades flickering, and I thought, I am going to die. Not today, but exactly like this. My inside will cast a whirling image for me to concentrate on. My heart or something, or even older, failing. My light. I named it all. The trees, the road, the frightening fan, the undiscovered country, which yielded a tiny poem I could never get right. The tenses always at odds. But it really happened. I saw my death in the sky. Yeah. Lots of kind of those kind of references to, like, getting funded, and what does that mean, and what's her role. Being a poet is like a passport to getting to have a certain kind of life, a certain kind of entry into stuff. It's definitely kind of, it's this Eileen character that this is getting created in here, whether it is a real one or not, is definitely one where it's taking advantages of all the foibles and jealousies and insecurities of this Eileen, um, whether it's fictional or not. Awards are the only currency American writing culture has to describe a writer's work. It's almost French, but in France, at least the ribbons mean something. You get a dinner, a bottle of wine. People know you. Here it's nothing. And like everything else, horribly, eventually it leaches into the soil. Even Allen Ginsberg wanted an award. The week before he died, he emailed Bill Clinton to say, "I'm Allen Ginsberg, the poet. I've never received any kind of award from my country, and it would be great if I could get something before I die." Yeah, they come across a hedgehog. Rosie was crouching as a fat hedgehog skidded blithely across the lawn. I thought about bringing her in, but I was kind of in awe. I lit up a smoke. I enjoyed watching her kill. It's like, and what we get is a really horrific thing of the hedgehog dug in and started clicking. It rattled, and Rosie began circling, lunging hard, and with each circle, each time getting a big, painful bit of the animal in her mouth. And now the creature was spitting blood. I felt powerless, so my watching only grew deeper. Now the base of the tree was doused in blood, what remained of the hedgehog's mad attempts to defend himself. I still hear that sound. It's like women make that clicking sound while they're thinking. Men do it too, but not so many. It's some kind of ghastly count, a skull speak. Women are ghoulish, in fact, which is like, oh, yeah, we suddenly went to it's funny, through the vehicle of Rosie, where you get the kind of the joy of Rosie, we also suddenly get somewhere very horribly primal and ugly, enjoying watching a kill. Um, this book is full of, I think Eileen Miles, they talk about it took him 10 years to write this book. And I can tell that because there's each little section within each little section is a kind of a very kind of nugget of whether it's poetry or thought or memoir. It feels very tightly packed. Like these have been worked, not like overworked, but it's just like it's been compressed and tightly packed. There's so much going on here. I can see it. There's some works that just feel thicker. I could tell when a poem had a little weight. It was real. For me, that weight is about feeling. I'm not an exclusively emotional poet, but I start with a problem and I keep returning to the feeling of it, not the idea. I don't replace it. It seems if you stay in an actual groove, a non-verbal pot, then the poem never really gets lost or boring. It is a poet's novel because it uses that kind of a poem's logic of images, of bouncing off the language, where you're sort of discombobulated, like, where the hell am I in this paragraph? And then you're bouncing all over the place, but there's an emotional kind of a thing there that you actually do get from the poem. The poem being, just, this is all blocks of prose, but it's very much prose poetry in how these paragraphs are constructed, and the very kind of raw, visceral, kind of fluidity of being of this Eileen Miles on the page. Even after she had one of her outrageous sunset orgasms, which she details while still basking in its immense succulent corona, slowly, with an utter generous and female smile on her face, a satisfied smile, and kind, she urges me to put my finger on her secret fingertip and feel the blood pumping as the pleasure is ebbing away. It's like, it's really gorgeous, and it's really intimate, and it's really sexy. Yeah, yeah. It's sort of, you're kind of weaving all these different experiences and times together, because person's memory, it's like, it's not like this happened and then this happened and then this happened, that, like, all lead directly to a line. You don't get the messiness of life. It's like this happened and then something else way over here happened, but then something back with that happened again, and then this happened and then that happened and this happened. Oh, and then we go back to this again at the end. Eileen Myles, definitely, they are organizing, they're disorganizing their memoir in a way to try and kind of give you a taste of, what it is like, what it was like to live that or experience that as much as you can. He introduced me to someone once as Eileen, who writes these really hot, sexy poems about drinking beer and lying in bed, which it's always interesting when you get an outside perspective, and it can kind of deflate you